Welcome back to the Becoming Her podcast. I'm back with Matt today, and I am really excited to dive in just because I geek out on this. It's just the the amount of misinformation around what we're going to talk about today is astronomically high. So Matt's agreed to come back and enlighten us, and we're going to really walk through and talk all things autoimmune. And Matt and I just had a meeting right before we started this podcast talking about how the cases and what we see specifically with the women that we coach is growing at a rapid rate. And this is something that there's a lot of confusion around. There's a lot of misinformation. A lot of symptoms overlap with things, i.e., like menopause and hormone deficiency. So, we're really going to dive deep. And I promise by the end of this podcast, you're going to have a solid understanding of what an autoimmune really is, because I don't think a lot of women even understand what it is and what you need to do if you're experiencing the signs and symptoms that we're talking about, what testing is required, what you need to do to really be able to work through this. So, Matt, I'm going to let you kick this off. I want you to really just, dumb it down for us of
Sure.
what an autoimmune disease is.
Yeah. I really think that that's the most important thing is simplifying it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like our healthcare system is kind of designed to complicate things so that people don't ask more questions
Yep.
and just lean into authority figures because they're an authority figure. So, in a very simplistic form, removing all labels of Hashimoto's, celiacs, all the rheumatoid arthritis, remove the label and just think broader term autoimmune disease. What that means is we have an overreactive immune system. And so the question first is, well, why? Why would we have an overreactive immune system? What is our immune system responsible for addressing in our bodies? In many ways, it addresses any type of foreign invasion. So infections, toxic burden, chronic inflammation, and extreme chronic stress. The nervous system and the immune system are very heavily tied together. So burdens or stressors or invaders to the body, the immune system is tackling. And another big confusion is antibodies. Our healthcare system has formulated this idea that antibodies are the bad guys, that antibodies are causing our symptoms, and we need to reduce the antibodies, whether that's with thyroid medication to reduce thyroid antibodies or immunosuppressant drugs, literally suppressing our immune system and suppressing the production of antibodies. But once again, nobody's asking the important question, why? Why is our immune system producing those antibodies? Antibodies are soldiers of the immune system.
Mhm.
And so the immune system is basically in a search and destroy campaign. They're looking for invaders to destroy them. And that's in most cases why we have an elevated immune system, elevated antibody count, is there's a search and destroy mission going on. Instead of us trying to suppress the immune system, we should be supporting the immune system and trying to get to that root cause burden. But getting to the root cause burden doesn't make us trillions of dollars in our society, in our insurance system, and our big pharmaceutical healthcare system. And so that's honestly the answer why they don't do that is because there's so much profits to be made managing those symptoms long term. And anyone with an autoimmune disease inevitably is going to have metabolic disease,
Yeah.
infertility, thyroid dysfunction, all the other things, cholesterol issues, heart disease, those are just coming down the line because it's the same root cause, internal stress or burden driving all those factors.
Yeah. I would say nobody's born with an autoimmune, understanding
Right.
that it's a sign of something much deeper
Yes.
when this is coming, and we see this on labs. And so I'd be curious, what are your thought process? We talk about how we see this and we treat this day in and day out on Team Becoming Her, but why do you feel like cases are climbing at the rate that they are?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of different answers that I would say are accurate or have some relevance. So In some ways, we can certainly argue that our modern day 2026 lifestyle is not best. We're all overstimulated. We're too reliant on caffeine and energy drinks and even pharmaceutical stimulants like Adderall. So we're too overstimulated. We're too fixated on social media and toxic habits. Most of us are not getting enough sleep. A lot of us are dehydrated. A lot of us are leaning into recreational drugs and pharmaceuticals. A lot of us aren't exercising and we're avoiding sunlight. So those foundationary things all do play a big role. However, you could also argue, well, we weren't that much better in the 80s. So what's changed in 40 or 50 years? The answer is our food supply has gotten much more poisonous. Our air has gotten much more polluted. Our soil has gotten much more polluted. And so, in many ways, our foundation is much more toxic, even when we remove our day-to-day habits. Because of these different contributions, lifestyle, diet, and the elevated toxicity of our environment, our nervous systems are way more compromised, and our immune systems are way more compromised. Our detoxification systems in our bodies are way more compromised because of our nervous system. So, this creates an environment where we're much more susceptible to disease and infections and viruses that we used to be able to fight off, and now we can't.
Mhm.
A great example of this is mold toxicity. You'll hear a lot of people argue, well, mold is everywhere. There's nothing we can do about it. Well, that's true, but we've never had nearly as much immunocompromised people as we do now, and now it's much more detrimental. 30% of all autoimmune cases have mold toxicity.
Oh
And
my
so
goodness. Wow.
it's a huge contribution
Wow.
to the metabolic disease and autoimmune disease epidemic, but not enough people are talking about it because it's become so normalized.
And just because something is like common doesn't mean that it should be normal, right? Like, and I think that
Right,
that's what
disease is
women,
common
yeah,
these days.
exactly, exactly. And that I think that that is what a lot of women like. It's just like, well, this is just what I like. This is normal. This is what I need to accept. And it's like, abso-freaking-lutely not. And I would agree, or I would argue that most women are walking around feeling like absolute rubbish and don't realize how good they could feel. And that
Yes,
rubbish of, just that very floor state has become their new normal. Not
yes,
understanding that they could be the energy and the vitality and their sex drive and just their ability and desire and willingness to want to do things is like
yes,
that state. But again, we
absolutely.
have normalized that as a society. And it is really, really, really unfortunate. And until you get to the root, and this is the biggest piece I want you to hear if you're listening to this right now, until you get to the root of what is really going on, we speak to autoimmune, the amount of training and diet and all of the things that inputs, you are not going to get the same output with those
Exactly.
inputs. And you are going to
Absolutely.
continue to spin your wheels and you will continue to stay in this stuck, frustrated, and confused state. And this is coming from the girl I used to think, and this was Nicole, I don't know, 5, 7 years ago, just up until recently, I've really started to put energy and effort into your nervous system and regulation of that
Yes.
being an absolute real thing. And to me, for the longest time, it seemed very woo. I'm like, okay, nervous system, fine, whatever. Like, I just
Right.
need to, need to relax a little bit and, I'll chill out. But I don't think we put as much attention and energy and effort into that piece of it, especially as I've been going through this whole gut protocol that I've been going through,
Yeah.
and just how connected our nervous system is to how our body performs in
Yes.
everyday life, absolutely everyday life. Do you have anything to add to
Yeah.
that?
Well, yes. I mean, you're 1000% right. And I don't want to go down too many of these types of conversations, but I'll just say this briefly. That's by design. If everyone had low stress and healthy nervous systems, 98% of disease would be out the window. Heart disease, autoimmune disease, endocrine dysfunction, PCOS, PMDD, insulin resistance, diabetes, all these things would be gone. Big pharma would be gone.
Yep.
Insurance, health insurance would be 10 times less expensive. They wouldn't be profiting nearly as much. So they intentionally avoid the conversation of chronic stress, inflammation, and nervous system dysregulation because that would fix everyone's problems.
Yep. And we don't want to do that because
Med school doesn't even teach doctors about nervous system dysregulation. If you go in with a high cortisol, they do an MRI to see if you have a pituitary tumor.
Oh my gosh.
That's the first thing they typically do if you have very high cortisol in labs. They do a pituitary adenoma test because they just can't fathom that people are that high stressed.
Yeah, yeah, get some sunlight, walk, breathe, eat some whole foods, lift some
Right.
heavy weights, and chances are for 98% of you that aren't dealing with like Cushing's disease, right? Like that you're those levels are going to come way down.
Yes.
But that's
Yeah.
just way too simple. And I think just as humans, though, we want to think it's more complicated
Yeah.
than what it is. And I am not saying when we were dealing with things like autoimmune and metabolic dysfunction that there's not a layer of complexity there. There absolutely is. But we tend to really overcomplicate things. And
Yeah.
we don't want to pull it back down to the very bare basics. And like Matt said, get some sunlight, breathe some fresh
Right.
air, move your
Right.
body, eat whole foods, all of the things that we preach, right? Like, and that will really, for so many people, solve, I don't want to say 100% of your problems, but like 85 to 90% of them, I mean, would be solved with just those things alone. And I understand within society today, because we're just go, 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 grind it out, is easier said than done.
Right.
But there's just so much power to that piece of it. I'd be curious. I know we talk about big pharma, we talk about conventional medicine. What are they missing in this whole conversation when we speak to autoimmune?
Yeah, so and again, this isn't attacking physicians. This is more so attacking the system and the education that they provide physicians. They're missing deductive reasoning and honestly some common sense. They're so focused on surface level symptoms and insurance diagnostic coding labels, like IBS. IBS means nothing.
Yeah.
IBS is a label for your digestive symptoms, but the actual cause of those symptoms are gut infections, poor nutrient absorption, leaky gut syndrome. That's the actual cause. The IBS is your symptoms. But there is no insurance diagnostic coding label for leaky gut.
Yep.
You have to say IBS so you can prescribe them something. So it's all prescription based. It's not healthcare based. And doctors are very, because they see 120 people a day, they're thinking prescription based. That's the blinders that they've been put on. Pharmacology and pharmacokinetics. That's what they provide. They're not trying to provide you a needs analysis for optimal healthcare. They're trying to get you out of their office and provide you temporary relief. Because if they provide you nothing, you'll say, they provided me nothing.
Yep. 100%.
So a lot of people are looking for temporary relief. And that's what when we're working with billions of millions and billions of people, that's kind of the best we can do a lot of times, you know?
It's that band-aid on an open wound, and it's like if I get
Yes.
some temporary relief, but then underneath the surface it's continuing to compound. i
Yes.
mean i mean day in and day out, it's like, Nicole, your team just caught my autoimmune. I've been walking around this for years. Like this is something that is so commonly missed, and like you said, I think it is, you know uh, just deductive reasoning. It is just, and it is too, I think there's a piece of just not truly understanding how to read and interpret comprehensive lab work, because
100%.
again, providers don't know what they don't know. And like you said, this isn't throwing stones. This is not what they were trained in. And so we as a society have been trained just to go to our regular doctor when we have any sort of problem, and we expect them to know everything and to solve all of our problems. And that is not, they were trained to treat disease. They were not trained to optimize your health and to really be able to dig deeper when, like Matt said, the math isn't mathing. And how many times have you gone to, if you're listening to this, you've gone to your PCP, you've gone to your OBGYN, labs have come back normal, but your body is telling you anything but, right? And you know something is off. And you walk out just feeling absolutely crazy because you're like, normal? How is this normal? And that's how we have
100%.
started to normalize feeling like absolute dog doo doo, especially as women and hormones decline. And I know we're not speaking to the hormone piece of this, we're speaking to the, but again,
Yeah, it all happens
it all
together.
happens together and it starts to overlap. So I'd be curious if,
And to your
oh, go
point,
ahead,
real
please.
quick, hormones are immunosupportive, neurologically supportive, cardiovascularly supportive. Everyone kind of thinks of hormones in regards to like fertility and fat loss. Hormones are doing a lot of things in our body, and crashed hormones lead to adrenal compensation and nervous and immune compensation. And so it may not be the driver of their autoimmune disease, but it's sprinkling gasoline on a fire, and it's
Mhm.
definitely not helping that they don't have that hormonal support to carry over what's going on in their body. And going back to the physician's situation and their limitations, we work in so many silos. You see a specialist for your cardiovascular system. You see a specialist for your endocrine system. You see a specialist for your GI system. So your PCP is actually very limited. They
Mhm.
actually have to refer you out. They're not allowed to even say, I think you have gut infections. They have to say, I'm going to send you to a gastroenterologist. And so the silos separate all of our symptoms, and no one's looking at the full picture and saying, wait a minute, anxiety, sleep issues, low sex drive, these are all nervous system dysregulations.
Yep.
High cholesterol, high inflammatory markers. This person's incredibly stressed. They're not doing
And we can't bill insurance for these specialists and charge you out the ass for, your extra high copay to see this specialist,
that.
which
Exactly.
chances are aren't connecting. And like, Matt said, there are so many different buckets. So if you have autoimmune, you're absolutely dealing with gut issues, which and you're absolutely dealing with compromised hormones. And there's so many different, and so they're sending you to 18 different doctors who are not
Yes.
connecting and talking together. They have a system they're supposed to read, but it's just like nobody's putting everything together, like all of the pieces and puzzle pieces together, so you can actually understand why you feel the way that you feel. So
Right.
let's talk about if somebody goes into their provider and they have an inkling that they're, working through an autoimmune or they're struggling with an autoimmune disease.
Sure.
What testing should they be asking for?
Yeah. So I think everyone, once a year should be getting comprehensive blood work that we've talked about this before, kind of looks at the full picture. And so looks at all the systems in the body. And so nervous system, that would be, cortisol and inflammatory markers. Endocrine system, that would be all of your sex hormones, not just one or two. Your entire thyroid system, which we know a full comprehensive thyroid panel with the thyroid antibodies included in that. Um, that alone and obviously your cardiovascular markers, your lipids, your CRP, your liver, your kidneys, your CBC, which shows us your white blood cell count. This alone gives us the foundation of what these systems are doing. And that can give us a lot of insight if there is systemic dysregulation going on. But furthermore, from there, if we're starting to be concerned about actual autoimmune disease, that's where we're looking at more immune system specific markers, CD57, component C3A, component C4A. These are specific immune system markers that basically are looking at specific types of white blood cells and immunoglobulins that go after stealth infections. So
Mm,
those infections that might be hiding from conventional testing, mold toxicity, Lyme disease, reactivated viruses like EBV and shingles and HSV. These things can go hidden and dormant for a while, so conventional labs don't pick them up. But if you do more comprehensive immunology testing, you can sometimes catch them that way. Sometimes it's a matter of analyzing different forms of antibodies, ANA antibodies, thyroid antibodies, rheumatoid arthritis antibodies. Even if you don't necessarily have rheumatoid arthritis, if you have elevated antibodies, your immune system is showing something is going
mm,
on.
yep. Let's talk about the data shows that autoimmune impacts women far more
Mhm.
than it does men.
Yes, true.
Why is that?
For the most part, the general answer is stress sensitivity or stress resiliency.
Mm,
Men handle far more physical and physiological stress than women do. A lot of this tends to be related to testosterone.
hmm
Testosterone combats cortisol. And so, because men have 10 times the testosterone in women, men truly do have stronger nervous systems than women. We both are, each gender has their intricate superpowers.
Yep,
Men's superpower is we handle more physical stress. We can
absolutely.
sleep less, we can exercise more, we can work more, we can go to war and survive those starvation detriments longer than women. We don't have a baby, support other life in our body. So men's bodies are just designed to handle stress differently. We are far less symptomatic. I know I've met so many cases of a man and a woman both living in a moldy house together. The woman has all the symptoms: psoriasis, GI issues, anxiety, PCOS, insulin resistance. She's going crazy every day. The guy's like, "You're fine.
It's
I'm
perfect.
fine.
Yeah, I'm
It's
totally
nothing."
fine. Yeah.
But then we also see the guys who have heart attacks and die at 55.
Mm,
And so they're less symptomatic. It doesn't mean they don't have the disease. They're just less symptomatic. They don't notice. Men are also less in tune with our bodies than women. Women know when something's wrong. Men are just like, I'm getting old. I'm tired. I'm working more. We avoid doctors more than women. We know that to be true. So men just kind of pass things off more than women, but men also just do have less symptoms than women in
yep.
general. And so in for those reasons, as well as the whole resiliency situation, women are 2 to 3 times more likely to have autoimmune than men. Women are 2 to 3 times more likely to have thyroid issues than men.
Oh,
Same exact reason. Stress impacts the thyroid.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that makes sense though.
It all relates back to stress and nervous system dysregulation.
Yep, bringing
That's
out the
the
woo
answer
woo
to
again.
98% of the questions.
It really is. It really is. Let's talk about, because we're talking about testing, we're talking about hormones, we're talking about lab markers. Let's like bring this down to the basics. I want to talk
Yeah,
about diet. Let's talk about
sure.
food and how food and your nutrition and what you put into your mouth day in and day out, how this drives stress in the body, how it drives, autoimmune. Like, I would love for you to, I mean, they hear me preach, so I want to hear, like, and I'm sure that they would love a perspective that's not me preaching on this. So I'm going to let
Yeah.
you take it away there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we can kind of take put the food conversation into a few categories because a lot of people kind of just make it black and white, good and bad food. But there's so much context here. And so there is good and, better food and worse food. So obviously we want to avoid ultra processed foods. We want to avoid refined sugars, and things of that nature. Um, Ideally, we want to try to go organic because our food is poisoned so much by pesticides and chemicals. That's where the valid argument around organic food does come in. And obviously, it's very expensive and hard to get, but there is validity. The whole argument around gluten is really an argument around glyphosate, which is the
Mm.
most popular pesticide used in Roundup. And that's driven tons of cancer cases. It's the leading cause of leaky guts and celiacs and GI cases. So pesticides are what makes gluten, for the most part, so toxic on the body and so inflammatory. Organic gluten or gluten from out of the country,
So
much
when you go to
better.
Europe, that's when people talk about I can eat all the carbs in Europe and I don't get nearly as bloated. It's like, well, there's a
Exactly.
reason behind that.
There's some reason. There's valid reasons for dairy as well. It's the filtration and the process that they do of removing certain digestive enzymes or enzymes that could help us break that dairy down because of the processing situation that they do, where we don't have those same enzymes. And so there's reasons that we're gluten sensitive and dairy sensitive and things of that nature. However, when we say sensitive, what we're actually referring to is our gut's response to the food. And so gluten and dairy inherently aren't bad foods. But when you have leaky gut or gut microbiome imbalances, you're going to see inflammation trigger from those foods. Inflammation then triggers the immune system and the nervous system and causes more disease and dysfunction. So it's not that gluten causes disease and dysfunction, it's that reaction in our body. And so I would say that, too much candy and ultra processed sugars is bad. I wouldn't put gluten in the same category as that.
Mhm.
However, if you have a immunocompromised state or a GI compromised state, gluten can be very inflammatory, and so can dairy, and so can alcohol. And so there's context to those types of situations, but it's triggering the body due to an inflammatory reaction.
You just brought up alcohol, and I was just going to bring that point up next because this is the woman we talk about, the woman whose nervous system is completely shot. This is, she's go, go, go all of the time. And she gets home, and the one thing that she looks forward to is her,
Glass
nightly
of wine.
glass or two of wine.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that
Yeah.
because there is no question that, especially as hormones start to decline, menopause, booze just impacts us differently. We
Yes,
cannot handle booze the same way that we could in our 20s and 30s. And I know that's not
sure.
what you want to hear, but it's
Right.
just the reality of what it is. So I'd love for you to dive a
Totally.
little deeper there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple discussions there. So obviously, alcohol does directly impact cortisol in some positive, but also negative ways. It can disrupt our circadian rhythm and our sleep patterns. So you get an initial relief and calmness, but in the long term, it's actually stressing the body. And at its rawest form, we have to be honest with ourselves, alcohol is a toxin.
Mhm.
And so that's why we see liver stress. That's why we see gut microbiome dysfunction. That's why we see digestive enzymes and stomach acid levels reduce. So you're actually digesting food worse when you drink too much alcohol. You're creating sluggish liver function. You're impacting bile flow, which then impacts fat absorption. And all of your hormones are metabolizing through the gut and the liver. So if you're constantly stressing the gut and the liver, you're directly impacting hormone metabolism, hormone conversion, hormone production. And so there's primary impacts and secondary impacts. And a woman who's already in this hormonally compromised state, say she's 45 years old, any little bit is just going to affect it that much more.
Yep. It's like the
And
number
that's
one
not to
thing.
say you can never drink. It's more so the idea of moderation and working on your stress, working on your sleep, the full picture.
Yeah, and that's like the number one question I get my DMs. It's like, well, can I still drink and lose weight? And it's like, I mean, there's context to that, right? Like
Yeah,
there just absolutely is. And if we're talking a glass or two a week, cool. If we're talking a glass or two of wine a night, like there's a completely different story there. Like it's a different picture. And
100%.
so it's one of those things that it's just not only the impact that Matt just talked about of how it impacts our whole system, and alcohol is a toxin, and your body's going to prioritize getting rid of the alcohol first and foremost. But let's just talk about the fact that it just pushes real food off of your plate, right? Especially if your goal is fat loss. And, we know the deficit drives that, and you're trying to fit 2 glasses of wine into your deficit every single, you're just going to really struggle to give your
Yeah,
body what it needs at that point to be able
yeah,
to see fat loss. And so that's slightly squirrel, but it impacts on such a bigger level than just I'm
totally,
trying to lose weight. It quite
totally.
literally, it impacts every bodily function that you have at that point. And so,
And to your point too, the discussion around like fat loss. So, and you brought up how alcohol gets burned first. You're absolutely right. Your body's going to burn off the alcohol, then it's going to burn off sugar, then finally it might start burning off fat. So a lot of these people don't understand that between their diet and maybe their recreational drinking, they've blunted so much capacity for fat loss in their hour-long workout, they were only in a fat burning zone for the last 10 minutes. Because for the first 50 minutes, they were burning through alcohol and sugar.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the, I mean, just alone giving up booze would, I mean, move the scale for you. If that's the only change that you made is, and again, I'm not telling you that you need to go sober, although fat
Right.
loss would be easier if you did, but, really putting some parameters and boundaries around that, not even just for fat loss, but just overall you feeling better. And I know, like Matt said, there's that temporary relief of, like it winds me down at night, but it's like, hell, girlfriend, replace that with some kombucha or something. But, find a different,
Yeah.
a
Different
different
coping
release
mechanism.
there. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So let's talk about the big question I think that everybody wants to know is, can autoimmune be reversed?
In my experience practicing functional medicine over the past 7 years, yes. It's a matter of getting to the true root cause. There is no such thing as an unexplainable, unreversible phenomenon in the human body. Yes, there is genetic predisposition to certain things, but there is still a trigger. So genetics load the gun, but your actions or the reactions to society is what pulls that trigger. So some people might be born more susceptible to it in an immunocompromised state, but they still had to encounter things to trigger that immune system. And sometimes that's very early in life. There are kids born with Lyme disease because the mother didn't know she had it when she was pregnant. And that gets passed to the child in the womb. There are children born in a house with mold toxicity, so they are very compromised at a very young age. Gut microbiome imbalances from the mother to the child also transfer because a mother and child share microbiomes. So there are a lot of things that can start early on in life that our healthcare system has made us believe is genetic. This has
Mm,
nothing to do with genetics. We're literally passing viruses and infections to our family members. Um, and so, um, you know, in terms of reversing it, you have to get to the bottom of it. If you're just trying to calm down the immune system and provide yourself remediation of symptoms, then no. But if you're going to dig deep and say, well, why do I have psoriatic arthritis? Oh, it's because you have a tick-borne infection that's burrowed itself into your joints and nerves. Now your immune system is sending antibodies to attack the tick-borne infection, but it's actually attacking your joints and nerves. That's causing the rheumatoid arthritis and the psoriatic arthritis. It's the inflammatory reaction to your immune system attacking bacteria. The problem is our healthcare system kind of they act like we're all dumb. And so they talk to us like your body is so confused. It's doing all these reactions that it's not supposed to do. And actually, you're confused. Our body knows exactly what it's doing to survive. Humans have been around for thousands of years. Our body knows exactly what to do to survive. And so if it needs to attack mold spores present in our throat and it's attacking our thyroid gland, well, that's what it's going to do. And if it needs to attack our joints because there's an infection burrowed there, or it's attacking our brain because we have a parasite, that's what it's going to do. And so instead of us blaming the immune system, we need to blame the burden.
mm,
But conventional testing won't, or conventional medicine won't do that testing. They won't do that deep dive. So most people just feel lost and they're kind of in a state of paralysis from analysis.
yeah.
They don't know what to do, and they've just been taught this is irreversible.
Mm,
And then as we dig in and we get to the root cause, we reduce that burden bucket in their body. Their immune system finally gets a break. They stop producing those antibodies. Their nervous system finally gets a break. Inflammation and insulin resistance come down. Everything starts calming down. Their LDL cholesterol starts calming down. Everything comes into balance.
mm. Let's talk about what that looks like because you hear like, okay, let's take Hashimoto's, right? Probably one of the most common autoimmunes. And you hear online and people that do their research, and it's like, well, I'm just going to eliminate gluten. I'm going to eliminate dairy, and that's going to solve this. Let's talk about what an actual protocol to fix this. Like, walk them through from start to finish how we handle this on our team, because it's much more than just we need to eliminate gluten and dairy.
100%.
There's so much more to that. So, what does an actual protocol to reverse this look like?
Yeah, yeah. So like we talked about, gluten and dairy can be inflammatory triggers that would spike the immune response.
Yep.
But a good way to think about it is gluten and dairy is gasoline. Gasoline isn't dangerous unless there's a fire present. Let's stop worrying about the gasoline and start asking more questions about the fire that's present in our body. And so, yes, if you remove gasoline, great,
Yep.
but the fire is still present. And so what we're typically doing when we have an inkling that this could be going on, obviously we're noticing certain markers show up in their blood work. Elevated CRP, insulin resistance, crash sex hormones, high cortisol, or the opposite, very low cortisol and adrenal fatigue, reactive immune system markers, skewed iron levels. Certain types of bacteria feed off of iron. So a lot of anemia cases are actually cases of infections. And
Oh.
the problem is when women start supplementing iron or doing iron infusions, you're just feeding the infections. And so we have to be cautious with iron support as well. But these are all signs of internal dysfunction that then takes us down a deeper path of getting comprehensive GI testing,
Hmm.
possibly getting tick-borne testing if we think there's an inkling of tick-borne disease or Lyme disease, um, toxicity testing. Like we talked about, mold and mycotoxins are about 30% of the picture. But there's other forms of toxicity, heavy metals, a huge one for women due to different types of birth control, due to metals in our water supply, um, chemicals, cosmetics, cleaning chemicals, scented candles. These are all things we inhale and ingest every day that are providing toxicity on our body. Plastics is a huge one. Basically, all of women's fitness clothing from Lululemon and stuff is all plastics, and they contain endotoxins that negatively impact women's endocrine system. Tampons, all these things are accumulating toxic burden on the body. And the idea is no one's going to be zero stress in 2026. That's impossible.
Yeah.
The idea is to reduce their burden bucket as much as possible. The concept is hypothetically, an autoimmune person, let's say their burden bucket is at 120%. If we can get them down to 60%, that is a dramatic change on their system. And now they can thrive. Now their body's willing to produce hormones. Now their digestive tract is willing to absorb nutrients and clear out waste. Their detoxification system is working better. Their immune system is working better. They have energy. All these things the systems are working better because the overall allostatic load, that's what we call it in functional medicine, the total amount of burdens on their body has reduced dramatically.
Mm. So that's going to be
And
a
so,
combination. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, so this is a combination of, to clarify how we handle all of this, is a combination of, yes, proper lab testing and markers. And so we can actually get an understanding, like Matt said, attack it at the root cause. We don't
Yes.
want to just dim the fire. We want to completely put the fire out. And the only way
Right.
to do that is understanding where the fire is burning, like where, like
What's it
what's
coming
causing
from?
the fire.
Yeah.
And so that's gonna like that's first and foremost is having that an understanding of what's really going on. And then we attack it via the supplementation, via the
Yes.
protocols, via the lifestyle changes, via your
Yes.
diet changes, via the, like Matt said, reducing stress load. That is going to look like, if you're struggling with an autoimmune, girlfriend, you're gonna have to calm down. Like you're gonna have to find ways to bring your and to really center yourself. And that,
Yes.
I think that is more challenging for a lot of these women than the diet changes and just
Yeah.
taking supplements, is really trying to find ways to center yourself and to de-stress. And I know a lot of women are hearing this like, well, that's just impossible. How do I do that? I'm a single mom. I have, multiple kids. I work 3 jobs. And it's like, I hear you. I
Yeah.
hear you. Circumstances, we can't always control the hand that was dealt, but we can control the way that we play the game, kind of concept. And you will
Yeah.
have to find ways
Yes.
to
And,
calm
and that's
yourself.
what we do.
Yeah.
And that's what we help these women decide because yes, you could be a single mother working 2 jobs with 3 kids, but maybe spin class 7 days a week isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 CrossFit workouts every day isn't a good idea on top of it. So making better choices and what we do together, we always help clients understand the difference between controllable stressors and uncontrollable stressors.
Mhm.
Your job, your family, your kids, those are out of your control. Got it. But your caffeine and stimulant intake, your alcohol intake, the 7 days of exercise, the bad sleep, that's all in your control. Let's work on those as we also work down that burden bucket. In many cases, they're already doing all the things. They've been doing yoga for the past year. They've been doing meditation. They go to therapy. They've worked on their gut. They've cleaned up their diet. They've checked off all the boxes, but they're still screwed up. And that's because they haven't addressed the internal burdens.
Yep.
So in that case, there's nothing left for them to technically do other than a treatment. They're checking off all the lifestyle boxes and the diet boxes already. Now they need a treatment. Um, and so, to go deeper into that, once we have all that information, like you said, this is what's so different than conventional medicine. We are reworking all the systems in the body. So we're regulating the nervous system, the endocrine system, the GI system, the detoxification system, the inflammatory system, the immune response system. That's how you cure someone. You have to rework all the systems in the body and treat the burden, whether that's parasites, GI infections, tick-borne infections, toxic burden. Even if you get rid of that, the systems are still dysregulated. And so we're taking this all-encompassing view of diet, lifestyle, temporary supplemental support, temporary peptide support, and every now and then, maybe even a little bit of antibiotics, depending on the severity of the case.
Mhm.
Sometimes we don't need that, um, but it's all encompassing.
Yeah. And making sure that when it comes to that support, when Matt's talking about the peptides, when he's talking about the supplements, when he's talking about the antibiotics, I see too many women try to piece together information off of social media and they start taking colostrum because somebody's taking colostrum to heal their gut.
Yes.
They start taking this probiotic because some
Yes.
influencer talked about it and it went mega viral. This cortisol cocktail because this is supposed to get rid of all my menopause symptoms. You guys, stop. The
Right.
amount of money, like I'm just like, if you're not
Right.
watching this, my hands are on my head right now, but the amount of money that is spent
Yes.
on just, and it's all marketing gimmicks and they do it, I guess, kudos to them. They do it really well. They market
Yeah.
really well, but the supplement industry is a multi-billion with the B dollar industry for a reason. And we try to, I get wanting to save a buck. I get trying to be cost friendly and, budget
Yes.
friendly. But at some point, you have got to, this is like, at some point, it's got to click that it is not working for you.
Right.
And you've spent more money trying to piece shit together than you would have if you just would have went to somebody who actually understands what they're doing, could put a protocol together for you, and you'd be done with it. I mean, we were just talking before we hopped on this podcast, Matt, but we're reversing what 4.5, 5 months. Again, every situation's different, but
Sure.
you buckle down for a solid 4.5, 5 months from somebody who actually knows what they're doing, your whole world changes. But you
Yeah.
spent the last 10 years trying to
Right.
piece together information and supplements and protocols and influencers and doctors and this and
Right.
that. And like to Matt's point, analysis paralysis. You spend all of your time researching and you really spend any of your time doing. And when I say any of your
Yes.
time doing the actual thing that's going to solve the problem.
Yes.
So,
Yes. And like you said, when you try to piece things together, you could go down so many different pathways. And guess what? All 10 pathways might be relevant, but because you did them separately, they provided no benefit.
yeah,
And so that's the thing too that you have to understand that it requires everything at once. You can't just piece things together. Trust me, if one peptide or one supplement cured disease, we wouldn't have disease, guys. Like, I want it to be that simple for you, but it's not. But to that same point, look how fast the world is going by. What's 4 months? 4 months is flown by. We're already midway through
I know
2026.
it's crazy.
4 months flies by. So if someone started on a treatment with us today, by fall, they're healed.
Yeah.
That's how fast it can actually happen when you dive in and you don't prolong things. And I mean, I have some great colleagues in the functional medicine space who take this very slow approach because they're trying to meet clients where they are.
Mhm.
And I respect that. However, I see them working with clients for 12 months, 16 months, 2 years. That's a long time that I feel was unnecessary if we just cut through the bullshit and
Get in, get out. Yep. Get in
yeah,
and get
get
out.
in and get out. Move on with your life.
Yeah, so that will require you, but and that's going to require a lot of internal looking at things. Like Matt said, it's just, and as women, what we try to do is like we're combating how we already feel worse, and then we're gaining weight. And so, like Matt said, we're adding in multiple spin classes and cardio classes, and we're eating like birds, and half the time, which is leading to our binge, and then we're covering up with booze. It's going to require you to center yourself, girlfriend. It's going to require some major shifts. But if, like you said, you can dial that in for 4 to 5 months. And one of my favorite things, like Nicole, I didn't even realize, like, I feel so amazing. I didn't even know that this was possible because I felt so awful, but I had felt so awful for so long that
Yes,
again, that was just my normal. That's how I operated. And my
yes,
heart hurts. So when I talk to women every single day and they normalize these, zero sex drive. They normalize that their hair's falling out in chunks. They normalize, that
yes.
they have absolutely no energy and they're having panic attacks and anxiety. They normalize those things as it just my heart hurts because it's like, why are you accepting this?
Right,
It doesn't have to be this way. I know that's what they want to convince you that this is again, but just because something is common doesn't mean that it's normal, nor does it mean
right.
that you have to accept that. And so
Totally.
that's what I really want to dial in. So if you pick up anything from this and like this is resonating, please, girl, I promise you, give yourself 4 to 5 months. Like you work with, if it's not our team, I mean, but just find
Sure.
somebody who truly understands what they're talking about and what they're doing. Last point I want to talk about here because this is all the rage. And I know you talked about this a little bit, but let's talk about peptides because I feel
Mhm.
like we have an epidemic happening. Everybody and their mother is on some sort of peptide. And I love peptides, you guys. I'm not bashing them. Believe me, I utilize peptides. They can be so powerful. But
Yeah,
what I feel like is going to happen is like people are on peptides and they're masking so many internal rooted things that are happening. And it's just all going to come crashing down. So we're going to have a wave of people that once these peptides stop being as effective, because we don't get to the actual root cause of what's really going on, it's just going to all just again. So I'd
right.
love for you to speak to peptides,
Yeah.
specifically to autoimmune.
Sure. So, one way or another, whatever type of peptide we're talking about, peptides are naturally occurring amino acid chains that provide biological functions in our body. And so, for example, that could be repairing broken bones or torn muscles. That could be upregulating the immune system's adaptability to kill infections. That could be improving inflammatory reactions or pain responses. Some of them just stimulate hormones and help with fertility. So, different biological functions in the body, but keep in mind, you still have to ask, well, why is this happening though? Why do I have inflammation? Why do I have digestive issues? That peptide isn't fixing it, it's supporting combating your symptoms. And so, obviously, the biggest peptide that's popular these days is GLP-1s, and they have benefits in many autoimmune disease cases. Why? Because it's reducing internal inflammation.
Yep.
In the past 5 years, we've heard every single medical practitioner, authority figure, influencer talk about getting rid of inflammation. Have we ever heard a single person explain to us the cause of inflammation?
No, of course not.
Never, never. Even the specialist from Stanford can't even explain to us the cause of chronic inflammation. There can be a few different causes, but when we're talking about chronic inflammation, the cause is infections, gut infections, tick-borne infections, parasites, mycotoxins. This is what's driving chronic inflammation. I'm not talking about an injury. I'm talking about nonstop inflammation in your body. When we see, the high CRP levels, the insulin resistance levels, the people holding 30 to 40 pounds, that's the chronic inflammation piece. And so these peptides combat inflammation, but as soon as you come off of them, boom, inflammation's back. These are the people we see gaining and losing 10 pounds on the same peptide. You're not gaining and losing fat,
Yeah,
that's
it's just
inflammation.
inflammation. Yeah, bouncing
And
back and
so
forth.
if you just treated the root cause, which is the infections, you wouldn't need that peptide anymore. And to that same point, there are some peptides that can be used in treatments. Thymosin alpha 1, it's very good at upregulating the immune system. So it's more powerful and prepared to fight off certain types of infections. So that can be very useful. But on its own, isn't going to cure you. Same thing with glutathione. Glutathione is our body's main antioxidant. So it's very powerful at detoxification support, inflammation support, immune regulating support. It gives you energy. But once again, if you're not treating the initial toxin or the infection, it's only going to have so much benefits. And so um, peptides are in this interesting space right now where they can be extremely effective tools used in the treatment.
Hmm.
They can also be effective band-aids to be abused. And unfortunately, they're more commonly band-aids getting abused than they are tools in a treatment.
Yep. Unfortunately, you are so very right. And we are going to see a whole wave of that come to surface when people like either, like I said, they just can't afford to continue to take peptides or
Right.
dosages get too high and side effects are crazy, right? And then all that comes back because, again, we did not dig enough to actually attack the root. We just, again, that band-aid on the open wound part of it that is hemorrhaging. And so, if any of this has resonated and you guys hear yourself in the conversation that we have today, this is the exact problem that we solve on Team Becoming Her. We actually have packages designed just through autoimmune and to be able to tackle and solve your autoimmune specifically. And, like we said, going in and buckling down in 4 months from now, like Matt said, you could completely feel like a completely different person. But that has to, you have to be ready to lean in. You have to be ready for that type of commitment. But if you're ready, that's the woman that we serve. So anything else to add, Matt, before we?
I mean, I'll just finish up with driving home your exact point. Anything worthwhile takes work. Anything
Yep.
worthwhile isn't easy. We're talking about reversing disease in 4 months. Disease that you may have had for 25 years, we can reverse in 20 weeks. But it requires certain steps and it's 100% worthwhile.
Yep. 100%. And I think the hard part is when women just don't realize how awful they feel until they start to feel good, right? And a lot of women, like we know that we have these symptoms, but again, we just have normalized that. And it's just a matter of what does your quality of life mean to you, and
Right.
what does that feel like, look like for you? And I promise you, when you get to the other side, and the only that whole saying the only way out is through kind of thing, but when you get to
So
the
true.
other side, oh my gosh, windows and doors open for you. That
Yes.
is for sure. So thank you so much, Matt. I truly
Absolutely.
appreciate you being here. I love that you can come in and really break these things down and simplify it, because like you said, a lot of women hear autoimmune, they hear Hashimoto's, they hear, lupus, they hear these terms, and they don't even really understand what that
Right.
is in their body or what it's doing. So hopefully, like I said,
Yeah.
this has been informative. If you are listening to this, I am going to link Matt's social media in all of the show notes. I will link the application if this is something that you're truly ready to tackle. We would love to connect and dive deeper there, but we will see you guys in the next episode. Ciao.
Bye, guys.